Very quickly about the organization I'm with, the Citizens Research Council of Michigan. We are nonprofit, nonpartisan. We are largely donation funded. The research that I'm going to be presenting was not funded by any outside organization, which allows us to really take the view of the public interest and conduct this research, reach results without the danger of our funding organizations imposing any bias. It's a really rare type of organization that I work for. The point of this effort, so I'm in Michigan. As with many states, Michigan feels that they are underfunding their road infrastructure. We have a lot of crumbling highways, local streets, and this has been a policy argument for decades, right? How are we gonna get more funding? What are we gonna do with it? And one of the ways that these policy arguments are made is to say things like, okay, look, our roads are the worst in the Midwest or the worst out of Great Lakes states or maybe even the worst in the nation, but look at our funding levels, they're the worst in the nation. If you dig deeper into those statements and figure out where that data comes from and what those statements mean, quite often they're kind of cherry-picked to make a point. What we wanted to do is reach as close as we could get to like a ground truth assessment of where Michigan ranks in terms of what our road infrastructure looks like and how well we're funded. So we had to invent a couple new methods to do this. So first, we created a multifactorial state pavement condition index. We used 17 different pavement and bridge metrics available from federal data. We could not get data on every single road within any state, but this does cover the federal aid network, which includes our most important roads on the national highway system and, of course, the interstate system. We also created a road funding index. This includes a decade of financial data from several different sources, and we pulled data that at least theoretically should include all road agencies within all states. So we're not just looking at fuel tax revenue or a state's transportation fund. This should include tolling authorities, local property taxes, wheel fees. Everything should be rolled in here. So I want to show you just kind of what it looked like. We're going to start with the Pavement Condition Index, and I want to show you how we took various types of data and sort of normalized it, it's the wrong word, scaled it into an index. So we have 17 different types of data that we use and basically took the range of data for all 50 states and then scaled it to an index. So I've got the Midwest states here. This is showing the percentage of interstate miles in poor condition by the pavement condition metric, which states report to the FHWA for the Transportation Performance Management Program. So South Dakota and Missouri reported 0% of their interstates in poor condition. You can't get better than 0% in poor condition, so those states scored 100. All the way at the bottom, I've also got the two states that scored the worst in this category. So Colorado and Hawaii both reported 3.9% of their interstates in poor condition by this PCM, and so they both received a 0. The rest of the 50 states received an index score based on that range. Does that make sense? So we did this 17 different times, and these are the results. So this is actually just one table. It's split into two to make it fit on a slide. So we just saw that South Dakota and Missouri scored 100 in that category of interstate pavement in poor condition by PCM. There's those two 100 scores there. Within those 17 metrics, that we used a weighted average to combine to a composite index score. And so here is all the rankings. And I've got the Midwest states rendered in bold. We're currently sitting in Illinois, which is, we're not doing too hot here. I can't really see that, so I'm gonna look at my notes to see what we rank. We rank 43 in Illinois. My home state of Michigan, not doing a whole lot better. We rank 40th in Michigan. So there's a lot that went into this. There's a lot of caveats, ways that this maybe could have been done differently. I'm not sure if it could have been done better, but I think this is probably, if not the most robust and well thought out, one of the most robust and well thought out ways to look at pavement condition across all 50 states that's ever been conducted. I wouldn't have done this if there was something else out there I already could have used. So now I want to talk about the second index, the State Road Funding Index, and I'm already sort of starting to regret this slide, but so all I want you to know, this also converted different data types into various index scores. It was a little bit more complicated because financial data is a little bit more complicated. There's different ways of assessing different parts of a funding process. And so when I started, I really didn't want to mix and match data like this, but when I just looked at one of my data sources, I would get some results that weren't intuitive to me, didn't think that it was capturing everything. So I actually pulled data from a few different sources. I used a table from the FHWA Highway Statistics Series, which is published every year, revenues used for highways, all levels of government. I also used total disbursements for highways at all units of government, and that I split into total disbursements across the state as well as capital outlay. And then there was another set of data from the US Census Department, the US Census Bureau. They do an annual survey of state and local government finances, and they report expenditures, all expenditures on highways, and they break that out into capital outlay as well. So now I have 5 different types of financial data. The next thing I did to make things harder on myself, so I pulled a decade of data, but I divided those 5 different types of financial data into 2 different time bins. So there's a time bin for that decade, but then another time bin for 2019 through 2021 because I wanted to emphasize the most recent data. So that's all in there. I did a cost correction factor. I'm going to talk about that on the next slide. And then remember, just having financial data raw doesn't really tell you anything. If Illinois is spending 10 times more than North Dakota, that doesn't mean much. Illinois' got a lot more people, a lot more highways, cities, so you need to normalize that data somehow. So we normalized that data in 4 different ways. We did it by system centerline miles of all public roads. We did it by lane miles of all public roads with a bridge cost factor added in there. We did it by population, and we did it by truck VMT. So then I had 40 different basically data sets that I turned into indices, combined them into 4 component indices, then combined them again into this final ranking. So all that's in there. It was a lot of data work. I was dreaming in Excel files for a few weeks. Oh, so one thing that I want to talk about as quickly as I hopefully can is this part was important. So ignore all this text. That's just kind of there to keep me on track because this is complicated, but really crucial to understand the results of this. Construction costs include all construction costs, but especially road construction costs can actually vary widely across states, more than you might think. I've looked at this a few different ways, and for example, well, I'll tell you where I got this data because it wasn't easy to find. There's not a good data source that can show you exactly how much you can expect construction to cost in any given state. But through the FHWA Bridge Condition Index program, they reported actual bridge costs estimated for the year 2020. And so we took this and basically assumed that we could use it as a proxy for all road work. Not sure if that's the best way to do that, but actually it's the best way available. And it's really necessary because if you don't do this, your results are they don't look right at all. You can tell that the cost correction component is very important. So at the top, and so the cost correction factor based on that FHWA data is given in that color-coded line there. And you can see at the top, Hawaii has a cost correction factor of 6.408. In other words, it takes about $6.41 in Hawaii to do as much road work as a dollar would do in a typical state. On the bottom of the scale, Texas has a cost correction factor of 0.31. So in other words, if you have a dollar of road funding in Texas, that'll go 3 times as far as a typical state. This is surprising to me, this range, but not shocking, because I've seen similar ranges when I've looked at this data in other ways. And yeah, it's the best way that we have to look at this, and this step is important, but just remember when we look at the results, so we've converted this kind of into purchasing power rather than the raw dollars. So this is how much a state should be able to do with the money that they're using. We've taken it away from those raw dollar figures. And this is the final road funding index. So recall that Texas reported the lowest construction costs, kind of by far. And so with the cost-corrected data, Texas scored as what I'll call the most generously funded state. I did conduct this analysis on the non-cost corrected data. And so for example, Texas would have been, I believe, 14th by that measure. So by raw dollars, Texas would have ranked 14th in this list. By purchasing power, they rank first. Also recall that I normalized the data in 4 different ways, which is reflected in each of the first 4 columns. And this is important because, again, states are very different. So for example, let's look at North Dakota here, which ranked 19th overall by our method. By funding per centerline mile, as well as by funding per lane mile with a bridge cost correction factor, North Dakota ranked 2nd. North Dakota ranked 48th. And so you would think maybe North Dakota is a very underfunded state, but by funding per population, North Dakota ranked 2nd. So maybe you think North Dakota is an extremely well-funded state. Which metric is more important? I don't know. That's why I included all of them. The final metric that we included, funding per truck VMT. This is important because trucks cause more pavement damage than anything else. So if you have a lot of trucks in your state, it's going to cost you more money to fix your roads. So for Midwest states, and again, this is purchasing power rather than raw dollar figures. Iowa is top, ranking 10th nationally. We've got Wisconsin 11, Illinois actually 14th, and you can see the other Midwest states rendered in bold. And again, there are a lot of caveats here. This wasn't easy to do, but again, I think this is one of the most, if not the most, robust and well-justified method of ranking states by funding, we'll call it funding adequacy, that has been done at this point. And hopefully I've made some progress convincing you of that, because this next step may not be quite intuitive. So we have a pavement condition index and a road funding index, each of which I believe are fairly well justified and meaningfully capture what's going on in each state. So I plotted these together. Pavement condition is on the y-axis, funding index on the x-axis. I expected to find that states with more funding would have achieved better pavement conditions. This was not the case. So the linear regression between these index scores shows an R-squared of less than 0.02. What's that mean? Basically, it means there's no correlation. If you give a given state more money to their highway programs, there's basically no reason to expect their pavement to get in better condition, at least with the data we have. The only identifiable trend that we can really see here is that about half these states are clustered in the upper left corner. This is kind of where you want to be. These states have achieved relatively good pavement condition with relatively low funding. If you're curious, I also did this analysis on the non-cost corrected data. There's actually a higher correlation. The correlation's about 0.2, but it's strongly negative. So if you don't cost correct that data, you're gonna find that the more money you throw into a highway program, the worse your pavement it is. That seems even less reasonable than no correlation at all. So we can kind of throw that out and assume that our cost correction factor is doing something appropriate there. So what's going on here? I did everything that I could to make both of these index scores as apples to apples comparison as I thought that I could. but it's certainly fair to question if the methodology is representative of what's going on in the real world. This was a difficult analysis. There's things that could have been done differently. First of all, I can only use the data that I have available to me. There are issues with data reliability, which I tried to account for in various ways, but still there, should be considered. I made some semi-arbitrary informed decisions about what I was measuring and how. For example, I emphasized states that could prevent pavement from falling into poor condition rather than states that had a lot of pavement in good condition. Had that been done differently, may have reached different results. Third, I used a decade of financial data. I would have liked to go back farther because the life cycle of pavements and bridges is 30, 40, 50 years. So just using a decade of data, financial data, may not tell you everything you need to know about how your infrastructure got to a current condition, but it also takes a lot of time, so only use 10 years. Fourth, and this one bothers me maybe more than anything, I tried my best to capture the cost drivers in each state, including things like bridges. I captured bridges and I captured costs in a couple different ways, but things like tunnels or very complex urban right-of-ways, I think I might be missing something there. I'm not sure. I'm hoping to go back and look and see if I can do that better. But I think it's pretty good. I think it's probably as good as you can, nearly as good as you can do with the data available. Finally, a quarter of the 25% of the road funding index was related to truck VMT. There could be something important there that we didn't capture about truck loading. I only know VMT. I don't know the weight of those trucks. So there could be something missing there. So there's a lot of caveats, but I did enough work here that I think we need to seriously consider the possibility that what the data is telling us is true. There's basically no correlation in the funding levels that a state gets that will allow you to predict what the condition of the pavement is within that state. So what might actually be going on in the real world? What are those efficiencies that if you're a state policymaker, you're a DOT, you're a road agency, what might you look at to stretch your existing funding dollars better? I'm from Michigan. I've looked a lot into the ways that we distribute our state revenue sharing across local agencies. It's crazy inefficient. We've had basically the same formula since 1951 when we thought our entire job was to build highways. That's a problem there. It could be a problem in a lot of states. A lot of states are still spending on system expansion. Texas is building highways. Wisconsin just had a big interstate expansion program. And those choices may be justified by the priorities of those agencies, but if you're making those capacity expansion, congestion mitigation choices, that money is not available to maintain your existing pavement. Third bullet point, I tried to roll in a bunch of stuff here with just QA, QC. I'm an engineer, I've been an inspector. I know that sometimes for valid reasons, we don't build everything to spec. Corners are cut, that will happen. But if it happens a lot, if you have a culture of cutting corners in your agency, in your state, your pavement might be falling apart a lot quicker than you expected, and you're not getting as much money out of your road funding as you might hope. Maintenance, everybody talks about how important maintenance is. I don't always see that in practice. It's a talking point, but when the sealant hits the road, maintenance practices are sometimes overlooked, especially drainage features. Getting water out from under your road is extremely important in keeping your pavement surface in good condition. And finally, this is important, transportation asset management approaches. Agencies are really challenged to decide, they have a pot of money, or actually probably several pots of money every year with various constrictions on each pot of money that they have to decide how to divvy up between dozens of different potential projects. An asset management system can give you very good decision support there. Every agency will tell you they have a good asset management system. I've seen some of them work, not all of them do. There's a lot of range there. So this is my final slide. That's my presentation. If you point your camera at that QR code, It will take you to a much more in-depth write-up of this research, and there's more links in there. You're also welcome to email me if you have any questions, epdennis@crcmich.org. Thank you so much for your attention.